One of these three models charges 50 times more than the cheapest. Kimi K3, DeepSeek V4 Flash, and Qwen 3.8 all launched within weeks of each other, all chasing the same coding and agent work. Run agents on the wrong one all day, and that price gap turns into a real bill fast. The priciest model here still wins a benchmark that has nothing to do with price. And the context window edge you'd expect one of these models to have barely holds up once you check the current numbers. Test 1, cost per token, the number that decides most of this. Kimi K3 runs $3 per million input tokens and $15 per million output tokens. Qwen 3.8 sits in the middle at $2 per million input and $6 per million output. DeepSeek V4 Flash comes in at 14 cents per million input tokens and 28 cents per million output tokens. Output tokens matter most here, since coding and agent workloads generate far more output than input. On that number, Kimi K3 runs roughly 50 times DeepSeek V4 Flash's price, with Qwen 3.8 landing about 21 times higher than DeepSeek. That gap looks small on one request, but run an agent looping through tasks all day, and it turns into a bill that actually stings by month's end. DeepSeek V4 Flash takes this test clean. If you've run agent workloads on more than one of these three, drop a comment with which one held up once the invoice showed up. A benchmark chart won't tell you that. My name is Brian, and I spend most of my week digging through AI benchmarks, pricing pages, and API docs to find out where these tools differ. So let's see where that price gap holds up. Test 2, coding benchmarks. Price only matters if the cheaper model still does the job, so here's how these three code. SWE Bench, verified, checks how well a model fixes real GitHub issues, and DeepSeek V4 Flash scores 79% against Kimi K3's 76.8. Qwen 3.8 has no official SWE Bench verified score published yet, so I'm not borrowing a number from its previous generation and pretending it belongs to this one. Terminal Bench 2.1 tests agentic work inside a terminal under a time limit, and there the order shifts. Kimi K3 claims 88.3% from its own vendor testing. One of the biggest problems I run into when using AI agents is turning their output into YouTube content I can actually use to market my product. That's why this video is sponsored by Subscriber, a tool that helps business owners connect their AI agents to YouTube and market their products without spending 10 hours every week creating content. You can connect Claude or ChatGPT directly to Subscriber. It then analyzes your business, website, and YouTube channel to help you create SEO-optimized video ideas, scripts, thumbnails, and even complete videos that actually match your brand. What I like most is that every week, Subscriber gives me a list of high-potential video ideas I can immediately execute, and it can even help edit videos for me, with or without my face, including videos like the one you're watching right now. It's easy to get started, and you can try Subscriber for free using the link in the description below. Now back to the video. Artificial Analysis independently checked it and got 85% instead, a gap worth knowing before trusting a vendor number outright. Qwen 3.8 scores 86.6 on that same test, and DeepSeek V4 Flash trails at 82.7. DeepSeek wins the more established benchmark. Kimi and Qwen both edge past it on the newer one, and Kimi's own reported score doesn't even match the independent check. I'm calling this test for DeepSeek V4 Flash, since SWE Bench verified is still the benchmark most teams build workflows around. That puts DeepSeek at 2, Kimi K3 at 0, Qwen 3.8 at 0. Next up, inference speed. A cheap, accurate model still loses if it makes you wait, especially running it dozens of times a day inside an agent loop. Independently, tracked numbers put DeepSeek V4 Flash around 120 tokens per second, with a first response landing in about 1.2 seconds. Kimi K3 runs closer to 41 tokens per second, with its first token taking almost 3 seconds to show up. Qwen 3.8 sits around 50 tokens per second on the one report available, so treat that as a direction, not a confirmed figure. DeepSeek is running close to 3 times faster than Kimi, not just a little quicker. That gap barely matters asking one question yourself. It matters a lot once an agent is chaining dozens of steps together, since each step waits on the slowest model in the chain. Kimi's extra weight can still be worth it if its reasoning nails the answer on the first try, But for most day-to-day agent work, DeepSeek V4 Flash takes this test. At this point, DeepSeek is sweeping the board, which makes the next test the one that could change all of that. That's DeepSeek at 3, Kimi K3 at 0, Qwen 3.8 at 0. Stick with me, because the last 4 tests are where this decision actually flips. Test 4, Context Window. This spec decides whether you can hand a model your whole codebase at once or split files into chunks. Kimi K3 and DeepSeek V4 Flash both list a maximum just over 1 million tokens. Qwen 3.8 lists a maximum input just under a million, near enough to the same range that it stops being a meaningful gap. A few months back, this looked like a clear win for whichever model had the biggest number attached. Check the current numbers though, and all three sit close enough to a million tokens that context length isn't the deciding factor anymore for most workflows. Nobody sweeps this one. Kimi K3 finally gets on the board, Qwen 3.8 gets on the board too, and DeepSeek V4 Flash picks up its 4th point. Yeah, that's DeepSeek at 4, Kimi K3 at 1, Qwen 3.8 at 1, and the category everyone assumed was already decided turned out to be the closest race of the night. The last test is licensing, and that's exactly the fine print that determines whether you can keep using a model once your product takes off. Final test, deployment and licensing. This one settles whether you can ship a paid product on one of these models without a surprise call from a lawyer later. The license terms underneath are not. DeepSeek V4 Flash ships under a standard MIT license with no revenue cap. Kimi K3 uses a modified MIT license that stays free for commercial use until a business crosses $20 million in revenue over any 12-month stretch, and at that point, Moonshot requires a separate agreement. Qwen 3.8's license hasn't actually been finalized or published yet. Treat any claim that it's settled under Apache 2.0 as a guess based on Alibaba's other models, not a confirmed fact. DeepSeek's terms are the cleanest of the three, so it takes the license half of this test, while availability itself stays a tie. All three are available through their own API, through OpenRouter and through OpenWeights, so plain access is a tie. Final scoreboard: DeepSeek V4 Flash at 5, Kimi K3 at 1, Qwen 3.8 at 1. Kimi K3 is the biggest of the three and holds a real edge on the newest agentic benchmark. It's also the most expensive by far, with a revenue trigger buried in its license. DeepSeek V4 Flash is the cheapest, the fastest, the leader on the more established coding benchmark, and it carries the cleanest license of the group. Qwen 3.8 is the newest release, a genuine middle ground on price and that newer benchmark, but the least proven on head-to-head coding and the least certain on licensing. If you need Kimi K3's edge on Terminal Bench 2.1 and cost isn't the constraint, Kimi K3 is your lane. If you want the newest model on the market and you're fine building on benchmark numbers still filling in, Qwen 3.8 is worth watching. For nearly everyone else asking which of these three to use, DeepSeek V4 Flash is where I'd start. The decisive reason is simple: it's dramatically cheaper and faster while still leading the benchmark most teams build around. One thing nobody talks about: Kimi K3's license looks completely free right up until your product actually works. Cross $20 million in revenue in any 12-month period, and Moonshot requires you to sign a separate agreement before you can keep using it commercially. DeepSeek's plain MIT license has no such trigger waiting on the other side of your growth. The model that costs the least also turned out to be the one leading the benchmark that matters most. That's not the outcome the price tag alone would have predicted. If you want to see how these three hold up in a real agent build instead of a spec sheet, that head-to-head workflow test is exactly what I'm covering next.